What is going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Framing the Force here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Batts, and joining me every week to discuss the latest and greatest in a galaxy far, far away is Robby Weidemann. Robby, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. This is gonna be a fun episode. It's a lot of stuff about someone we all love. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, so for this week, we're diving into a different kind of topic. We're taking a look at not only one of the most iconic characters in Star Wars, but one of the most iconic characters in all of entertainment, Darth Vader. Throughout this episode, we'll be fully discussing the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker and the character's impact on media as a whole. So, Robby, being the resident Phantom Menace expert, let's start there with our conversation about Anakin's beginnings as a creation of the Force.
So I know he was basically a reaction to Plagueis trying to do Plagueis Sith things with the
Hmm.
midichlorians, and the Force was like, "You're getting a little too out of hand here, buddy. We need to push back a little bit." And boom, we got Anakin. That's short,
Yeah.
sweet, pretty much the summary of that. And what I love about the Phantom Menace, and I love a lot of things about the Phantom Menace, but what a lot of people didn't like, especially when it came out, was that he was a 9-year-old boy. But I like that we start like our journey with him at that age. He is a
Hmm.
little young for sure. So like I mean, granted, yes, it's a kids' film, and that's what they're for, and especially the Phantom Menace. But people are like, "Oh, I wish he was a little older, not this little kid walking around." Blah blah blah. But I like it because you get to see why he wants to be a Jedi. Like where he comes from that makes him, that ultimately will have an impact later on in the future on his downfall. And I think one of the most core elements of Vader or Anakin, interchangeable, um
Hmm.
is the that search for control, because he starts off his journey or his life as he's a slave, and he's controlled by Watto or whoever his owner is at the time. He's got that master slave dynamic going on, and I like to look at him and having a love for mechanics and fixing things. Like he created 3PO, which I think is a really fun little like small world kind of thing. Yeah, it makes the galaxy a lot smaller when George made the decision, but I think that was a fun little thing. I don't know, it's a cool little full circle thing. I like that choice.
Yeah.
But like the example of him making 3PO, um and him building his pod racer and everything, and just being good with making things and just engineering and whatnot. I like that when you're making these machines, you have that control over them, like that aspect of you choose what goes where, or you're handcrafting it yourself. That's ultimately your baby in the end. And then in the case of 3PO, you could program it however you wanted. Well, made him 6 million forms of communication, 6 million little languages up in there. Like he could have made it seven, he could have made it five. He chose six. Like that's a little thing you could do.
Hmm.
Like with the pod racer, you could choose like speed over like just I don't know extra features or whatever you have to make a choice with on pod racers. Um, but like
Done
it
all
gives him
the specs.
yeah, exactly. But like it gives him that element of control, and like he goes further on, and I'll let you speak in a hot second because I've been rambling, but I can
No,
touch
you're
on this
good.
more later. But he just keeps like he ultimately like like Attack of the Clones. If the system works, like if the dictatorship is the way to go, like those are the political views he starts talking about and siding with, and a dictatorship is ultimately just one of control at the very top. And I mean, yeah, I mean, take it away, Alex. I want to hear what you have to say.
No, that's real. I think that's really good insight, and really, I hadn't necessarily thought about it completely at that level before. I do agree that I think that him having that knack for mechanics and engineering and those kinds of things is it adds another layer to his character, which is just nice no matter what. But then, yeah, the way that you describe it there, and the fact that it does give him that extra sense of control over the situation, and as you were saying, you can customize it or change to get the desired outcome that you want. But also, it's the type of system where if something's not working, you see exactly why and you know what to do to fix it, and you have those avenues open to
Mhm.
you, and it's all about like finding, okay, well, this is the solution to that problem. We'll implement this solution, and it's not necessarily thinking. It's not that he doesn't think outside the box because he definitely does in some of the things that he does with his inventions or whatever, but he just sees it as a problem with a solution that presents itself, and he's like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. And he just kind of like, yeah, that ideology kind of sticks with him. Um, and yeah, I do think I also agree with your point that it is important, I think, to see him as young as we do, like as a kid. You
You don't
get
wanna throw him right into, like, a Padawan movie, like, you don't wanna, like, jump right into that, like, "How do we get there?" You know?
yeah, and it gives you. It's just cool because you get so much more perspective. He's one of the Star Wars characters we have literally seen basically from, not his birth, but like
Day
9 years old
one.
into, yeah, until his death, like, and so getting that full scope of his life, I think, is something that's really interesting, and I think that getting the Phantom Menace taking place when it does, it very much is a setting of the stage for the more intense and rapidly escalating things that come later.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that that was definitely a smart decision. Like, I don't think that it would. Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine like one starting a handful
As a
of
s
years, like
Yeah.
in between the gap
Even, like, if
between
he was,
one
like,
and two.
Obi-Wan's age that Obi-Wan is in The Phantom Menace, like, I feel like that's so like, you miss it, like,
Yeah.
just so much character, like, just personality traits and just little things like that, like, literally just him growing up and, you know, you don't wanna jump right into like, yeah, it'd be sick as hell to see him swinging a lightsaber in episode 1, but, like, you gotta get there. It's a trilogy. We know it's 3 movies, you know?
Hmm.
Like, let him do some other things, show his other traits that isn't forced. I mean, you could and they still sprinkled in, or George still sprinkled in force stuff, but you don't have to, like, specifically heavily focus on that. You can focus on, rounding him out as a character in that time before you get into his whole love life and the downfall and him specifically as a Jedi becoming a Sith. It gives you time to just kind of develop him as a whole outside of
Yeah.
that specific focus of his story.
No, it's very important, and it was obviously. I say obviously. I think it was definitely like the right decision. It feels very obvious in retrospect, just because it's so difficult to imagine it a different way, um,
Hmm.
and it just enhances it so much. What do you think about the whole like him being the chosen one, and the fact that that's a very immediate thing from the beginning, and that's something that Qui Gon mentions? It's a this just added layer to his character that's not. I don't it's not a character trait so much as it is a trope, right?
Right.
And so how do you feel about that, interact with that, like, as a fan? Because I know there's a lot of people that very much hate it, and a lot of people that think that anything that could possibly negate the fact that he's the chosen one is, like, the worst thing to ever happen to Star Wars. So, like, where do you how what are your thoughts on that?
So at this point, like I I was alive for a good year with just the original 3 movies, and then I and then I grew up like well, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones came out, and then ultimately Revenge of the Sith. But like by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, I was kind of a functioning like I understood what was going on with the lore and stuff. But
Mhm.
like so I grew up mostly with 1 and 2 as like my very formative like learning how to walk years kind of
Right.
Star Wars films. And so I only have ever looked at, viewed, taken Anakin as that chosen one. I mean, that's just the story I was given. I was
Right.
like sitting there developing with it. Like that's just all I've ever known. So I can understand why people don't like it. Um, I don't like the fact that I don't even like the fact that George in his draft was going to make Leia the chosen one. Like I don't really think if there is a chosen one, it should be changed. Like, just leave it. That's you got 6 whole damn films about it. This is like the original
Right.
6. Like,
Yeah.
and this was the vision for Star Wars. Star Wars is Darth Vader's story. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, like, don't touch that at this point, in my opinion. But like, I understand if people don't like just a chosen one aspect in general, and I don't mind if it like if people are like how May says, oh, we may have been wrong. Like, I don't mind if they were actually wrong and there is just flat out no chosen one because that could just be a prophecy misread, like which is what happened. Do I want him to say the chosen one? Yeah, I would think so, but like I don't know. It's a really weird topic. I don't think anyone else is deserving of the title. Like
Mhm.
Doesn't matter if you're a legacy character, a newer one. I don't care. It's either Anakin or no one at this point, in my opinion. But that's all I've ever known, and all I've ever really. I haven't really just even cared to try and take a different side on that.
Yeah, I think this kind of breaks down sort of into two camps for me, I guess, in the fact that I look at the chosen one trope just more broadly as a trope, an idea
Hmm.
that we see, and then also specifically the chosen one in Star Wars, because there is no separating. Because I agree with your point here that there isn't really separating the chosen one idea in Star Wars from Anakin. Like that is,
Right.
like you just said, we have six movies that are about specifically
Yeah.
him being the chosen one. That's what it was for so long.
When you usually think of Star Wars, it's one of those 6 movies are often what comes to mind for, like, I mean, it's just that's what the story is. It's a chosen one story, at
Yeah,
least how George told the story, which
yeah.
is how it should be respected. But
So I think that, yeah, the idea on a large scale, I think it's super interesting just in the different ways that stories want to explore it. And I think that Star Wars obviously offers its own take on that. And I think that it definitely works. I at the same time, though, am not overly passionate, I guess, about a
right.
stance on it, like one way or the other. I think
Like,
it's
yeah,
just a,
either if for yeah, like for me, it's either Anakin or no one. Like if there is no one, oh well,
yeah.
I'm not too worried about it. But like, I think we should just leave it alone. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not trying to debate about who it might be. I
Yeah,
think especially for Star Wars, it's clear that it's Anakin, and I'm not going to get really worked up about disagreements one way or the other with that, because I also at the same time don't think it's that big of a deal. I
yeah.
think that
Like
it's one of
I
those
have
things that just, if you do enjoy it, can add an extra layer to it, because you then look at the story through this lens and have all of that metatextual as well as textual um, perspective on it, and kind of a different way to approach it. And so I think that that's what you can get out of it.
Yeah,
Um,
if I wanna debate you on something, this is the least of my,
it's not
this
a,
is pretty black and white almost at this point. Like, I don't really care. Like, it's not worth my time.
yeah.
I'll give you my opinion on it, and there you go. Next conversation, please.
I do think it's interesting how it's such a like he's the chosen one. It's a don't trust the chosen one type archetype myth thing for half of it, but then also is no, but he's still the chosen one and is
And
able
it
to be
gets
redeemed thing.
fulfilled. Yeah. It
Yeah,
really
it's
that really adds, that making that an element really added to that ending, that or
mhm.
the original, I mean, original
Yeah,
ending, the original way he, I mean, regardless, it just beefed up that scene basically. Like it just made it so much better and add that extra layer. And I think it was a good decision. I don't mind a lot of the things introduced in Phantom Menace. Like I don't know. I think he had an idea, and yeah, he went a little bit like wild with
maybe
a
maybe we
little bit
didn't need the
extra with
midichlorians, but
but
it's fine.
yeah, exactly. A couple things we could have probably toned down a bit or whatever, but like more or less from like a skeletal perspective and just like the bare bones, he I can't complain. Like the story is damn good.
Yeah. No, I definitely
Sets up
agree there.
everything really well. Like I don't know. That's me.
Yeah, I
I'm
think you
not
did.
a not a popular opinion.
I think you did a pretty good job. So, what do you think about him, the Duel of the Fates, the losing Qui-Gon, and how, because that's become a big thing that I
Oh
think
yeah.
more people are talking about and aware of, because there was that one clip that went around a while back, of Filoni talking about this, and the
Hmm.
fact that, it's losing Qui-Gon as being a possible mentor to Anakin, and how much that impacts the events that then go from there.
I That clip is really funny to me because it opened so many people's eyes, and I was like watching that clip. I'm like, oh yeah, he's explaining it perfect. Like this is the perfect way to explain it. But I'm like,
Yeah.
and then I'm seeing the reaction. I'm like, did no one make that connection? Like,
Connection. Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, he literally says, "I'm going to train this guy." Like this
Hmm.
is my Padawan, and we all know how Qui Gon was as a Jedi. Like I think he would have been the perfect mentor. I really do think Anakin's chilling if
Yeah,
Qui Gon's
I
around.
don't think there's a fall
I don't even know
if
if we hit a Clone Wars. Like I
I
think
posted that.
Palpatine's screwed.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, they there's that one, which is fantastic art, by the way, by Uzuri, I think is how it's
yeah,
pronounced,
I know what you're
but
talking
of
about with
Qui-Gon in the,
the
like, Clone
concept with
Wars
Qui
thing.
Gon and his army. Yeah,
Yeah, and someone had posted what they, like, thought if Qui-Gon had survived the Phantom Menace, like how he would be in the Clone Wars or whatever. And I was like, I don't. We're not getting to the Clone Wars if
Yeah.
Qui-Gon survives the
Yeah,
Phantom
like
Menace. Honestly,
he is leaps and bounds of just like smarter and ahead of everybody, and by far Palpatine's biggest threat at the
yeah,
time of, well, I guess, the Phantom Menace. I mean, it wasn't a threat after that, but like
yeah,
up until Maul did his work, he was a problem.
yeah. I'm glad we're in agreement there. I definitely don't think the Clone Wars would have happened. I definitely think, yeah, Anakin would have been completely chilling, which is
Yeah,
a
no, I
wild thing to think about.
and without that, you've thrust Obi-Wan into this, like, oh, I'm about 2 seconds into being a knight, and now I'm also going to be someone's like master.
Yeah,
Like that,
I can't
like he
imagine.
was set up for
Well, and
failure
then
there.
also the fact that Anakin is brought into the Order um, much older than children normally come into the Jedi Order.
Yeah, that in itself, like, I mean, he knew his mom way too well, and it seems like going back, like, I don't know if it's more with Disney or just Star Wars in general. I'm not too brushed up on the Jedi's ways with the Old Republic, as I am with the Sith. But it seems like the age wasn't as strict pre Phantom Menace. I mean, definitely strict. Like 9 years old is too old. But I feel
Hmm.
like some 4 and 5 year olds were getting in, and like come Phantom Menace, they were talking like a year or two, like don't know your parents type
That's
young.
wild. I can't lie. I haven't really looked into the specific like where that cutoff lies at different points in time. So that's super
Yeah,
interesting.
I have to. I wish I could. I want to look
There's so
deeper
many
into that.
ethical things there that are
Yeah,
so
it's
just
bizarre. It's bizarre. They're kidnapping kids,
it's
man.
crazy.
Jedi are
It's wild.
terrible. The Sith get a
Um,
bad rap.
that's a total. I don't know about that necessarily. I love the Sith, but I don't know. We don't have to necessarily go there. Um, no, that's a different episode. But okay, moving into like episodes 2 and 3, kind of. What do you think
Yeah.
about? I think the biggest takeaways from those two are, I mean, obviously the Clone Wars starting, but like that, and then specifically for Anakin and his character, like his relationships with Obi-Wan, Padme, and Ahsoka, like during that time.
So
Um,
I think with two you get a really good look into, well, not only Padme, but specifically like you get your best look at him and Obi Wan.
oh, him and Obi-Wan in that movie is so good. Honestly,
It's
I don't like that
that
movie. Bad
that
movie,
movie is really
but
really low on my list, but it's I slowly get more and more appreciation for it each time I
dude,
watch it. It actually has slightly started to age for me pretty
the
decently.
middle, like 45 minutes to an hour and like 15 minutes maybe is just like the weirdest paced,
Until yes, yeah,
like
absolutely.
slog
But
thing. And I'm just
once
like,
you get to the best scene in the movie, in my opinion, Obi-Wan versus Django, the rest of the movie is a
oh,
cakewalk.
it moves. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great.
but
It's
getting
fantastic.
there is a little bit of a chore.
And it's just wild because they're going through such interesting like narrative things
Yeah,
too.
like they're
And
really
like
all
on
important.
paper, banger, absolute
Yeah.
banger, right?
Like the Obi-Wan detective movie? Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's rough the put together of that. But yeah, no,
But
you were
no,
saying
you just get like a really good, like you get your definitely like closest like microscope lens into how Obi-Wan has been handling taking Anakin in under his wing,
Mhm,
um as his Padawan. And it's interesting because like Obi-Wan had no chance. Like that man had no chance to breathe as a knight. No,
dude
he
was
was
set
set
up
up
to
for
fail.
failure. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's hard for him because he's learning on the job. But then you got to control this really old Padawan who was like just accepted because of the weight he carries in terms of just raw power and this prophecy.
Mhm.
And on top of never even opening up the handbook to teaching a Padawan, like Obi-Wan's got to deal with all that. And this kid has a raging, like, just passion for the ones he cares about.
Yeah,
So,
unrelenting, yeah.
how do you hold that back? How do you like teach this kid to let go of that? I don't even want to know how the kid mourned Qui-Gon and how long that went on. That was probably the hardest lesson, like, or one of the
Oh, yeah, I
worst
don't even
ones one had to teach.
yeah.
Like, so I don't know. They're absolutely amazing in this movie, but poor freaking Obi-Wan, man.
Yeah, dude was pretty it's just unfair. Like, and it also it puts him in a position too where not only is he just not equipped for the situation he's immediately thrust into, but also it then their relationship takes a much different dynamic than I think the normal like master Padawan relationship
Right.
is, and it's something
Especially
that's
because they're not to cut you off real quick, but, like, they're closer in age than most
yeah,
Master Padawan duos, but continue what
no,
you were saying.
I mean, yeah, that's part of what I was going to bring up, and it's something that is made textual too, in the fact that like they Obi Wan being like, "We were brothers," Anakin like, and
Mhm.
that kind of relationship as opposed to a like it's still a master and apprentice relationship, but it's a different dynamic between them than what you would normally get. Um, and so, yeah, I think that all of that, and as you were saying, just the passion that Anakin has for the people that he cares about, and the depth that that care goes to, um, really just gets solidified as episodes 2 and 3 go on, and that time, and especially like the Clone Wars. Um, of course, we got a whole 7 seasons that dive into that like way
Really
more.
flesh him out more as
Yeah,
his development over those 3 years.
which is so good. It's also I know that it's technically 3 years in the canon, but there's no way the Clone Wars is 3 years. I'm sorry, it's longer than that. I don't care. Like, it's fine. Um, canon time.
Before we dive into the Clone Wars, I do wanna ask your opinion on the whole Obi-Wan Anakin dynamic in the sense that they're they call each other brothers,
Hmm.
but in episode 2, Anakin refers to him as like a father, but also for the 3 days he hung out with Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon was like a father to him too. So,
Yeah.
like, how like, what do you
Well, I mean, this just
like, I look at him closer as a brother like, as a brother dynamic, but it's really interesting how in, like, a 3-year time difference, they jump from, like a father figure, and since he's now a knight come the Clone Wars times, and they're
it's
kind of
more brother,
equals,
well, and it's
it
because Ewan and Hayden look like brothers, not father son, right? So I okay, I think that the way that this breaks down for me is the fact that I don't know compared to comics, kind of in the fact that we you have a little bit of a weird age thing going on with Anakin and the way that he look like is portrayed on screen, and it just not like necessarily lining up. I know on paper you can force it to line up, and that's another weird thing that kind of adds to I think this conundrum in the fact that with Star Wars we do have specific time dates for things. It's the
Mhm,
reason that comics stopped giving us specific time dates for things a lot of the time, right? Because they realized that if you tie these characters down to whatever, like, oh, now he's 132, right? And so you like can't do that. And so it's the thing where in the Phantom Menace, it definitely makes more sense for Anakin to look at both Obi Wan and Qui Gon as Qui Gon, especially obviously at this point, but like
mhm,
as a potential father figure. Um, in Attack of the Clones, I think it's less likely or makes slightly less sense for Anakin to be saying that to Obi-Wan in there, just because like as I was saying, it does Ewan and Hayden do look closer in age to being brothers than they do a father and son.
mhm.
And so I think that that's what kind of makes it feel a little bit weird, because the time jump that happens between episodes 1 and 2 and then 3 is significant, but it's just I don't know, it puts them in a weird position where
But
it's
it's
like,
also really interesting because in a master Padawan dynamic, it's basically like the master's your parent.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So
that's the,
it's
like,
yeah,
non-subtle yeah, like, there it's the yeah, I mean, it's just the very,
but the way they
like
act is almost brotherly. So in that film, by 3, they're definitely like brotherly acting.
yeah,
But like in that,
yeah,
in like in 2, it's definitely like borderline, like kind of like an awkward, like Anakin kind of like slowly getting more comfortable
mhm,
kind of thing. So it's really interesting. Like I that kind of topic as always just especially just because it's meant like in one movie they're mentioned as brother, in one movie they're mentioned as a father,
father.
and this is me just simply taking it literally in the context of the movie, and I always like to try and figure out like how do we get to here. Like I mean it's kind of, you can see it develop over Clone Wars
It's
and just how they act, but like
it's
it's really
probably
it's a fun
honestly
thing to play around with.
I would guess too, because I can't remember I don't remember the context whenever he's saying that,
I
calling
think
him
he's
father.
talking to Padme about it, I think.
Interesting, because I bet it's to do with, like, the role as in I would have to guess, like, I don't know if antagonistic, but, like, the role that Obi-Wan is playing in the context of, like, how he's being talked about there, would
Mhm.
be, like, more of a role that a parent would play as opposed to
Mhm.
a brother, and so that's
Yeah.
probably, like, what the context switch there, or, like, the reason that they used that there. Um, yeah, no, it's really interesting, though, and it definitely, is something that is a big highlight, between the two of them. It's just such a strong
Well, it's
relationship
really
in general.
funny, the connection between like, another connection between them, a similar thing that happened to both is Anakin was just thrown into master or not master, but, like, teaching,
Yeah.
duties, like, just thrust on him
Yeah, not
way
the rank of
against his
master, that's for
wishes.
sure.
Yeah, definitely did not get the rank of master thrusted on him.
Yeah, no, he did get teaching duties, immediately, and well, not immediately, but, far before he was
Really
prepared
quickly
to.
into being a knight.
Yeah. Um, which this is I think this is the incredibly interesting, and also I'm just incredibly biased here because Ahsoka is my favorite Star Wars character, and so I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is the best thing." Um, but I do think it adds a lot to it. One adds another relationship for Anakin, which I think is really not that you, like, necessarily needed another one, but it's just more, like, emotional damage that you can then inflict on the audience because you know that he's gonna be turning into Vader, right? And, like, you get that, and so adding another arc there that's well done because it's amazing, on top of the Obi-Wan and Padme of it all, I think just is more good story stuff, and so that's cool. Um, but yeah, I think that it's a really interesting thing to say, okay, well, we now have a Padawan, um, from Darth Vader, Anakin at the time, obviously, but, like, that's just a cool avenue to explore, and then I love, seeing the difference in Anakin's teachings and how that impacts Ahsoka, and then just her character arc throughout the entire show, obviously, and then it's extended past that now, and Vader still even has, or Anakin still had influence in that recently too. And so yeah, I think that that's definitely of the three, that's my favorite dynamic. Again, a lot of that bias though just definitely does come from the Ahsoka side because Anakin is not. I love Anakin and he's great and he's. We'll talk about it more later as far as like all time characters, villains, and stuff. He's for sure up there, but he's not in my like top couple of Star Wars
He's
characters at all.
nowhere near my top,
So
honestly.
like,
My
I
girlfriend
res- like,
would slap me, like, Kira's gotten him number 1, no doubt in her mind, especially because Hayden
yeah,
Christensen doesn't give her any damage to that ranking.
right,
So
right. Yeah, I respect him much more than I like him as a character, I think, which
Mhm.
sounds so harsh, but, like, just because I also still love him as a character, but yeah, what do you think about the Ahsoka relationship? I'm curious about this because I know you also very much love the Star Killer Padawan angle for
Yeah, so
Darth Vader, so,
when
like,
it
how do
I
you
was
feel?
definitely not a fan when she first was introduced, definitely not a fan, but like, it I actually saw something earlier today, it was like, "When did you start, like, liking Ahsoka?" It was like a tweet or
I saw
whatever.
that,
And my answer was Rebels. Like that's when she really started to shine for me. Like she was great in like season 3, 4, 5 Clone Wars, don't get me wrong,
mhm,
but I really like Rebels Ahsoka. So I've never been like the Ahsoka stories with Anakin have never like they really flesh out and explore and explain so much for both of them. But they've just been in terms of just general stories being told in Star Wars. I haven't been like huge on them. It's not like
yeah,
they're bad or anything. There's just a lot more that I like more,
yeah,
specifically within Clone Wars. But like
that
in terms of relationship, I think it's the story makes perfect sense. It's told really well, and like you said, it's another fun layer to just add on to just Anakin's good old heartbreak
oh, yeah.
in both just him as a person and just for the audiences as well.
Yeah, it's a nice extra knife in there. It's funny. I actually, for when I like started liking Ahsoka, because I didn't watch the Clone Wars as it aired. I watched all of it. I binged it to get caught up for the season finale. So I watched like I mean, yeah, I watched essentially all of it right before the finale aired, and so I got all of that in such a condensed time frame, and so she just kind of instantly became a favorite for me. But like,
Mhm.
just as soon as I was like instantly as soon as I watched 7 seasons of television, right? It's
Yeah.
like just such a condensed time there, and so yeah, and Also, though, ironically, like, talking about her relationship with Anakin, my favorite Ahsoka stuff is not in relation to Anakin, really. It's the Siege of Mandalore, which, like,
Mhm.
is by proxy Anakin, kind of, because Maul's trying to get to him, but, like, that stuff is my favorite, and then the Rebel stuff with Anakin later on is really, really strong too, but yeah, still definitely her being my favorite part of that thing. But the last thing I want to touch on pre his fall, pre before he's got to have a breathing apparatus the whole time is kind of I'm gonna kind of like throw these two together because I think that they are pretty intertwined. But the his relationship with Padme and his eventual fall from the Order because of wanting to save her and the manipulations of Palpatine and like his role
Yeah,
in that.
we move on from the Jedi to the politicians.
Yeah, right.
But,
Um,
y yeah, no, I mean, you could start with either one, like, to touch on the father figure, that's a true one you've got for Anakin,
mhm,
and then, you got his wife. I mean, they're both pretty important, but I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes down to Padme, and, I mean, it's just pretty much, they got married in secret, we all know that, and he's been dreaming and thinking about her for 10 years, and, like, pretty obvious to him, this is the love of my life. Bada bing,
yeah,
bada boom. And he carries that guilt with him, though, the whole time from being a Jedi and promising his mother that, as a Jedi, you're a strong, powerful kind of person. You can kind of do anything more or less. And, he tells his mom, I will come back and free you. And look what happened.
right, yeah, yeah. We
She
didn't even
bites
like
the
touch on
dust.
that, but the whole yeah.
Yeah, like we'll briefly touch on that. Like, I guess this will carry into Padme pretty simply. But yeah, I mean, he just promises to come back and save her. And yes, she ends up becoming a free individual person, no longer a slave. But she gets kidnapped and killed and dies in Anakin's hands. And you know, it goes from dreaming about Padme for 10 years and with a few nightmares sprinkled in of your mom later on and very later on in those 10 years to now you are married to Padme. You've secured like that dream, like you've got your wife now. Your mom has passed, so what is going to be occupying your thoughts at night? But boom, my wife's going to die now.
Yeah.
So I really love how we go from one movie we see Anakin fail to the next movie we see him just get there and he's right there and then he just oops, I did it myself.
Mhm.
So that I do love that connection with Padme. But yeah, I mean, I'll let you have a little run at it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting, relationship. Obviously, I think the most pivotal, for any of them. I do think it's very the Clone Wars did a lot for Padme's side of things as far as making her more of a well-rounded, like, not just the significant other for Anakin to love and then lose to
Mhm.
facilitate his turn to the dark side. But I do think it's interesting. I am not sure that you like. I was thinking about it, and you don't really get Anakin's fall without both Padme and Palpatine, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to have. I think if just Padme dies and there's not Palpatine adding that extra layer of temptation and like, hey, we can do this, and overt manipulation
Gaslighting.
of both Anakin and the entire Republic and the governmental
Yeah.
system, like that's happening, like all that stuff too, right? You don't get Anakin also turning the dark side. You do have him probably acting out and stuff in
Mhm.
various ways, but I don't think you get the lengths, the extent that you do when you throw Palpatine into the mix. Similarly, I don't think that Palpatine has the necessary lever to convincingly and as completely convince and then control Anakin as he does
When he has
by Padme.
Padme
Yeah,
dangling in his face, yeah.
exactly. And so it really is, I think, fascinating that it's the perfect combination of them two, and throwing that in there. That's like, hey, you're screwed, Anakin. You're
Mhm.
going to be a servant for the rest of your life. You'll have all of this power, but you'll never be able to save the people that you care about the most, and it sucks to suck. And so
Yep.
I think that
Get
that's
good.
like right. It's super I think that's another part that makes the character so interesting, and this will segue pretty nicely, I think. But, like, the fact that he is a tragedy, like, it's such a tragic story, and it's so compelling, and it's so like, that's why the prequels are still they're so engaging and enjoyable to watch, like, you know where this is going, you know how this has to end, and, like, it
It's
just
modern day Shakespeare.
yeah, and it just rips every time. You're like,
Mhm.
"God, this hurts so bad every time," and it's just so it's such a fascinating watch and such a good story. Um, yeah, bad news for Anakin, man. That's rough.
Yeah, no.
Bro bro gets
He
cooked.
he he gets the short end of the stick, and we're gonna talk about that more. So when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion by continuing Anakin's journey and talk all things Darth Vader. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Framing the Force. Before the break, we discussed the rise of Anakin Skywalker and his fall to the dark side. Now we're going to dive into Anakin's second half of life as Darth Vader. Alex, what is it about Darth Vader that makes him such a compelling character?
One thing I wanted to touch on, you immediately said it, but the, like, second half of his life as Darth Vader, doesn't he spend is it even or doesn't he spend more time in the suit than not in the suit?
He is 9, he's 22 when he falls. He's about 22, 23 when he falls.
Right, and then that's
19 years from that makes him the beginning of A New Hope.
41, right?
And then, so
In
he's
New
like
Hope.
44, 45 when he dies, I think, something like
So he
that.
did spend slightly more time in the
Yeah.
suit than out. Rough. Rough.
Yeah.
That's part of what makes him
Yeah.
a super compelling character is that he spends more that's a terrible fact that Sean just dropped in our producer chat that Grogu is as old as Anakin. I hate it so much. I hate that little green. This is not the podcast episode to talk about it. Anyways, yeah, I think that's part of it, right? Is that like he spends so much time as the Darth Vader, as the bad guy, the bad half of
Mhm.
his life. Um, and so I think that's something also one character design. Like he just has one of the best character designs
What I
of
love
all time.
about, like, specifically George and, like, character design is perfect, like, he's awesome, but what I love
Mhm.
about George and his theory, he said it a couple times, that if you don't have a good silhouette for a character, what's the point? Like,
Yeah,
if you can't pick them out without actually, like, if it's out of their silhouette, then they're not gonna be memorable, and you
right.
can pick that silhouette out with, like, blindfolded at this point, like, it's crazy, like, it's beyond iconic. It is the most iconic, probably, just the helmet alone.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's I mean that's such an applicable thing too. If you take that and apply it to so many characters that are
mhm,
the most recognizable, it works. That's why you can get the silhouette wallpaper images of like all the different characters, and you're like, oh, I know who all of these people are.
right.
Um, yeah, it's he's I don't want to say he's one of the examples of like character design can like do so much. Boba Fett is the classic example of like a cool character design can get you so far, right?
Yeah,
Like you
real
just
far.
like like and so Vader has that and he's got the actual character and story side of it
Mhm.
too, right? And so one there's no like there's just no overstating how cool that man looks. He just looks sick. It's a fantastic design. The sound is amazing.
Haunting.
James like yeah, his James Earl Jones' voice is fantastic. Like it's just all of the things there
All of the
packaged together.
elements that make him up, it's just they're all at the top of their game, and you just
Mhm.
get it, like, the S god tier, top of the line, like, number 1 product out of it.
Yeah, it's just it's phenomenal. So I think that's a big thing with like him being so just relentlessly compelling.
Mhm.
But then yeah, just the stories that they choose to tell with him in general and like from post his fall. So I think it's interesting. I have noticed a slight, I don't know if divide is maybe being like too strong, but I know that a lot of people um, don't like Vader as he's been portrayed like post the original trilogy, like just those three appearances of Vader, right? As more of just the
Mhm.
like not a monster for the entire galaxy, like hunting down Jedi and like
Just a straight up, like,
just the most badass thing
yeah.
you can possibly imagine, right? Like they don't like that version and that idea of Vader. They like the more, I don't even know the proper. I've seen people
Enforcer.
that, yeah, like the enforcer kind of like also really. and a lot of the descriptions I've seen when people bring this up, they'll be emphasizing the fact that like he's the emperor's lackey. Like he's not like it's a degrading position that he finds himself in. Like
Mhm.
he feels that he can't ever challenge for power himself, right? That he's in that position. And
He's
so
the
like
right-hand man, but he's also the bitch, like
yeah, exactly. It's that whole dynamic and the power dynamic really being emphasized there. Um and I do think that that is a big contrast to the like he's a dark god essentially, right? And a lot
Mhm.
of the appearances that we can see him in, like in the comics and the end of things like Rogue One or whatever. And so, like, where are you on that spectrum as far as do you have a preference for one? Like,
I
what is kind of, and
I
do you think that they gel well together as a like we
I
have all of
think
these things with Vader now that exist? Do you think it conflicts at all a little bit
I
or what?
think I do think it all kind of like like it touches on like all of his, I don't want to say potential, but for a lack of a better word, like all of the things
Yeah.
he can do, like all of his traits and capabilities. I think it kind of shows them off well. Like I gotta say, like of all of the really interesting choices Disney has made, they have handled Vader like, and they should and have always treated him and looked at him as this like fine, fine jewel you don't fuck up.
Yeah.
And they've more or less, kept it nice and shiny and polished and no scratches from what I've personally felt so far. Um,
Mhm.
so I think they've handled him like that is the one thing they have, I think, more or less on. I don't want to use perfect as the word, but like I think that's the one thing on their track record with the property that they don't really have any blemishes on.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly, this is more news to me that people only like the Enforcer original trilogy like view like depiction of him, and
Mhm.
I can get that. Like he's sick as hell. Like
Yeah.
that is definitely my favorite kind of depiction of him. Um, I mean, aside from like when he's pre-crisp going absolutely nuts in the
Right,
Jedi
yeah.
Temple, but aside from that, um, I
Pre-crisp.
mean, I think yeah, pre-Chris, baby. um, but no, I think he's been handled well, even on the outside, like in the comics and everything. The comics are really fun. It's a lot of the stories are just Palpatine fucking with him, which is great. I think it's really fun, and it's just shows you. It also like not only shows you one side of Anakin or Vader, or it shows you the Anakin side still in Vader, honestly. But it
Mhm.
also just shows you that like Palpatine is straight up just the peak of Sith. Like he is just a dick. Like he is
Yeah.
a bad person. Doesn't matter who you are to him. You are just beneath him.
Mhm.
And I like example, probably my favorite example is when he literally just taunts him with Padme's ship. Like
Mm.
he's like, here you go. You can go do this mission, and here's the vehicle you'll be taking, and it's Padme's. I think it's the J type Nubian, like from episode one. I'm pretty sure
Okay, yeah.
that was the one he gives her. So like really like that's rude. That's rude as
Just
shit.
top tier troll, like
Yeah. So like I don't know. I personally like the seeing because I've always liked I like the conflict that Vader has. I like and I think it's depicted really well. He's kind of not I definitely not humanized, but like you kind of like feel a little bit for him. So I don't know.
yeah.
I like the balance of it. I do prefer the original trilogy's depiction of him, but like those are perfect depictions. Like he was great in every single film. Like what you're really competing against just the A list, like the top of the top. So it's really hard to put anything in comparison to those. But I don't know. I think they blend well. I don't. I yeah. I wasn't aware there was
It's not
a
like a
side to
huge
take.
that's why I think that, like, divide is maybe a strong like, I've just seen people, like, when talking about Vader, that is something that I've
Hmm.
noticed, and I do think that it is kind of you can definitely look at it that way. 'Cause I mean, like, if you think about, like, his kill count in the original trilogy compared to, like, the fact that he is now, like, the worst war criminal ever, basically, right?
Whoa,
Like
whoa, whoa, whoa! Put some respect on Chopper's name.
right, but, like, that kind of thing, like, I think that there is when you just look at it in that kind of context, there's a big stark difference to how he's portrayed there, but I also do agree that I think on the whole, it does somehow still blend together well because I think that when you put it in the context of time and also the way that it's told in each of the stories, you're doing a lot that further develops his character and further explores interesting elements of that character. And you get different viewpoints from him in different time periods, and it kind of all works together to create like a fuller picture of his psyche and his character and like where he's at on his journey. And kind of also it's just such an interesting thing to get the insight, like especially in the comics and the novels and stuff, of how he's thinking through
Like
everything that
inside
he's
that
going
suit.
through. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, like, you're getting to inside the head of the monster, essentially. I mean, he's a horror monster, like, in some regards, right? And so,
Mhm.
getting to that level of depth there, I think is really cool.
Really
Um
completely, like, small side note that is not really anything to do with, like, his the depth inside of his head, but I do love that in the comics, he's depicted with black speech bubbles. It's a really
Oh,
nice little
it's
touch they do.
yeah, it's I mean, I love yeah, it's fantastic. It's great character work and just design and, like, getting it you further engrossed in the story. But yeah, it's a cool thing. I think all the I haven't read all of the comics with him, and I've read
I
all
think
of
I've got, like, 20 left.
well, see, because there's been multiple runs at this point too. I've
I've
read all
done
of
the
Charles
first I did all the first run, and I think
Soule's,
I
yeah.
stopped at, like, 30, 33 in the
I
current Vader run that
I
just
read the
ended,
first,
I
like,
think.
2 arcs of the current or ending Vader one. I'll get caught up eventually, probably.
Yeah, I
But
do wanna finish it.
yeah, I mean, like, they're all good, and I think that they all do work for what's going on in the galaxy at the time, what's going on with Vader as a character at the time,
Mhm.
and kinda displaying that. And, like, yeah, you could definitely make the argument some of it gets is just, like, wanting to see some really cool badass action and, like, crazy power level stuff. But, like, it works, I think, and it's fun to see, and, like, it's a comic book a lot of the time or it's a novel or whatever, and I think that it works there and is definitely. And then it also the things that they do well, and you touched on this, is that it's still always is displaying, like, even if he's doing the most just ridiculous thing you've ever seen, like, it's nothing in comparison to the hold that Palpatine has over him and what Palpatine can do. And, like,
Mhm.
that's a, like, consistent through line in his characterization across all of these things, and so I think that that does a lot as well. Um,
No,
but yeah.
I like how, like, the comics, touch on because the films touch on his relationship with Luke. You don't really there's still, I think, that gap to be had, which I think that might be explored in the Battle of Jakku
Mm,
comics with Leia and Luke because there is still a lot of that gray area with her. But she does find his helmet on Endor in like a preview that was like
I
posted.
did see that image, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be explored there. That's like the last little like part. But I like how the comics specifically touch on his relationship with Palpatine and how like what he like his regrets and how he messed up with Padme and how Padme kind of haunts his nightmares throughout those comic issues, like always in the back of his mind, and just happens to find himself in situations that remind him. But whether he's visiting her gravesite, he gets the ship from Palpatine. He's faced with the handmaidens, like always constant reminders, and how he deals with those. And I really do like that they explore the things outside of just Luke and being the chosen one within like in detail within the comics.
Yeah, I think it's some really strong stuff, and that just again, it's exploring the right layers and the right things, and it's like you were saying, just treating like all of the projects treat him with such care, and you can tell that people are so like this is an important thing,
Mhm.
and you feel that in all of them. And yeah, it's just consistently great appearances too. Like I love him in the Thrawn books when he shows up, and also just in general seeing like the ripples that his dynamic in the Empire, just how his character both like directly and then also indirectly just as a figure in the empire, like the effects that that has is just a really cool thing. Like he's just such a focal point and like a gravity well for everything in Star Wars and like in the galaxy. And it's a very fascinating thing to have that much weight on a singular character, and then also to get the level of exploration with that character that we do with Vader is something that you just
And
don't see a whole lot.
it's really funny because he the entire time he is just second fiddle to Palpatine. Like he's always just
Right.
like you said earlier, he's always like he's got that power over him. He's always going to be on top of him, and he just he's this menacing force that just happens to be reined in. And I think it's I enjoy the fact that his redemption and the completion of his character arc is him not only, saving the galaxy, killing the emperor, like the ruler of the galaxy, this evil ruler of the galaxy, but he's
Mhm.
also breaking his own chains.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice little double whammy there. But it always makes me think like who was more important in episode 6? Luke for convincing Vader to go back or Vader for executing the job when Luke was full on
Down and out.
done. Like yeah, like
Yeah.
who is more important there?
Yeah, it's also okay, so you brought it up, and I wanna talk about it. Do you are you in, like, the camp redemption works and is good, like, he's redeemed by the end? Or do you think that his redemption does not work because of previously aforementioned long list of war crimes and, like,
I
all of the and all of the atrocities that he's committed?
I think what is yeah, he killed a lot of people.
Yeah, dude is directly responsible for a lot of deaths, like,
That's
a
a lot of
not
people.
insignificant amount of
A
bodies
lot of
are
zeros on the end of that long list, but
right? Like, if
he
Star Wars was
does,
canon to Dune, then Paul Atreides would have been citing that, bro, like
yeah. Like, oh man, it's really hard to look at because he does also take out the single man who is the one who said, "Do that."
Right, so is that, like does that just clear it? Is that how that works? Is that how
I
the
don't
scales
think it
get balanced?
necessarily clears it. Like I
Mhm,
always had the like I think like he redeems himself and I think like he definitely brings balance to the force. He completes that chosen one prophecy arc with that.
mhm.
But also like if that man survived like some kind of something had to like that man had to be punished in some way, I think. I don't think like I like to look at it as like yeah, he definitely like did some good shit. Definitely deserves also some kind of whether it's a slap on the wrist or something. Just give
Slap on
this
the
guy
wrist.
some like I don't know. You got to do
5 to
something to
10.
this guy. Like he did also just kill the emperor.
I
So
mean, like,
like
he dies, so
definitely
it's
like
there's
cut the yeah, he does die. So there's that. But like if he survived, he
Well, does
killed the
that add,
emperor,
like,
cut
to
the
his do you think that adds to his redemption? Like, do you think that that is, like it's like, okay,
I don't
he
really look at the redemption, like the death as a part of the
as
redemption,
any
I
part
don't
of the
think.
equation?
I
Like,
think
if that's
like
just the
redemption is
byproduct?
is like as just like him his redemption is him like laying on that railway,
Ramp?
like the
The ramp?
railing
Oh, okay, yeah.
or okay, yeah, the ramp. I'm sorry. I'm I think the first part of the redemption or honestly the main part of the
Tossing.
redemption is tossing him over just kind of when he's sitting there hung out, he's like, "Oh, I did the job." But yeah, like he gets that nice little moment with Luke,
Mhm.
but I think where I cut off the redemption is when he's still inside the throne room.
Okay.
And because the death, I mean, yeah, he died. That's definitely a price to pay, but I don't think that was I don't think that has any factor with his actual deed was and what
Mhm.
and completing his prophecy. So that's how I look at that. But like I said, if this man was survived, was being tried or whatever, definitely knock some points off for throwing Palpatine over the edge. But definitely give him something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's tough because I think that where I stand on it is that generally redemption is not something that is given or can be earned necessarily. It's something that's continuously strived for because, like, you can't ultimately, and it sounds corny, but you can't undo the things, right? You can only like
Doesn't
seek to try
just redeem yourself
to
with one act.
yeah, like you just try to continuously do better, right?
That's
And make
fair.
the right choices when you had previously made some really wrong ones. And so, like, I
A
don't
lot of
know
things to
if
make up for.
so I don't know if there's any like I don't think that you ever necessarily like are redeemed. That doesn't necessarily mean that like
I
you
think from
should
like
that you should simultaneously. I think that there's a world where like he's not necessarily redeemed, but I don't think that simultaneously means that if he had survived, he then should also be shunned forever, right?
I think
And
we're
like
at the point where like we should distinguish it in he was redeemed in the force, but as an actual person, no.
I mean, yeah, I'll give the like he completed the
I think
chosen
like
one arc,
he did his
like
prophecy, like he fell,
finish
but like
the
he actually did bring balance. Like and he
as a
ended up
person
being
he
a
had some
force
work still
ghost. He came
though.
back around, but like I don't know.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do okay, this is a super and, like,
He
niche.
did kill a lot of Jedi that damn, man, this guy is awful.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying, like, I don't, like, I don't think he's, like, morally or on a personal level redeemed. He just, like, needed to still continue doing things,
He
and I
he got
also
a good
don't.
act out of the way.
Yeah, he did one, and, like, I do think it's an interesting thing, and I don't honestly don't know where I fall on it, but, like, whether or
Mhm.
not well, actually, I do know where I fall on this because I don't like punitive punishment generally, um, but, like, I think it's an interesting question whether or not if he survived, like, if he then is, like, tried and, like, the death penalty, like, and then is executed, like, if that for some people would then be like, "Okay, now he's redeemed because he, like, went through that extra leg of the process," versus, like, he died
Paid
just
the
as a
extra
byproduct of
price.
just as a byproduct of the events of what was going on in the Death Star,
Mhm.
like, that counts less for some people
That's an
morally, like,
interesting and a
if,
fair
like,
way to look at it.
yeah, I think that that's an interesting thing. Like I said, for me, like I don't believe in punitive punishment. So like trying him and then sentencing him, I'm like, well, that's not really doing anything for anyone, actually, in my opinion. But like,
Right.
um, but no, the thing that I was going to bring up that bothers me a lot that happens in one of his later appearances post Return of the Jedi when he shows up in Ahsoka as a Force ghost, he should not be wearing the darker robes because the entire point of him wearing darker robes, going from Attack of the Clones to the Revenge of the Sith, is to highlight visually his character in his downfall and falling to the dark side. So it doesn't make any sense for him to still be wearing the darker robes when he's like post redemption post. Because one thing's for sure, as far as Star Wars is concerned, he was definitely like at least in the like Force thing, as you were saying, like he's redeemed there. So like he's a Force ghost and he's a Jedi. He should be wearing light robes. That's all I'm saying there.
I'm
Like I
not
think,
gonna argue with that or disagree with that because he should be, but
yeah.
also I do like, sometimes Star Wars has stupid decisions, and you need to
Like
make
that's
some
not the
kind of,
biggest
like
one
you need to
for
make
me.
a head canon. You need to make a head canon up or some kind of, like, thing to kind of justify it. I just look at it as the Force Ghost can choose how they appear to people, and
That's fair.
she would remember him in the darker robes, so he appears to her in the darker robes, and I just say, "Alright, next stupid argument."
No, that's fair. I will say it's not a huge deal. It's just
Yeah,
on the
it's not
from
like,
like
yeah, it's like, all right, well, this makes sense. It could work like that. All right, let's go to the next stupid nitpick in Star Wars.
yeah, because there's an endless. No, that's super okay. I think that was the last thing I had on there. But yeah,
Yeah,
so I think redeemed, sort of, maybe.
yeah,
Like
he gets enough done, I guess.
jury's maybe still out on that.
Yeah, we're still a little asterisk, a little gray area, but
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to continue discussing Darth Vader, but this time talking about his place on the pantheon of all-time villains. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Framing the Force. Before the break, we discussed Anakin Skywalker's time as Darth Vader, and now we wanted to open the conversation up to discuss how Vader stands in history on the list of all time villains. So he's up there against the greats like the Joker, Hannibal Lecter, Agent Smith, Sauron, and others. Robbie, where does Darth Vader stack on your all time villains list?
I think, and this is a tough one, but especially for me because I always like try to not look at it with bias, but I think I have him at number one. I mean,
I mean, that's
like,
fair.
it's
That's
just between just and the only people I could maybe see him having competition is Thanos in terms of just like if we're talking like films. Like I
mhm,
think Thanos can give him a little bit of a I don't really subscribe too heavily to the that competition, but I think
mhm,
in terms of like a film perspective, Heath Ledger's Joker specifically can give him a nice
yeah,
run for his money. And just the
mhm,
Joker in general. I think the Joker in general is the only other character who can come close in terms of just in general media. I mean, but other than that, I think it's him. Just between like just the pure evil. I mean, his like I said, his silhouette's iconic. You can pick him out a mile away, 2 miles
yeah,
away. Like just the design, the the iconic noise, like this, the breathing
right.
itself is.
Everyone like who doesn't imitate the breathing?
You don't have to be a Star Wars fan. You could have never seen Star Wars, and you'll know who Darth Vader is. You'll know who the Joker is probably too, but you'll
Yeah,
definitely know who Darth Vader is. Just and you'll even know what his breathing is.
yeah.
Like it's really hard to just ask someone if they know who Darth Vader is and get a no. It's really, really hard.
That's a very good
Like
point.
like,
It's hard to argue
it
against
doesn't matter
because, like,
their age, if they've seen it, it's just a hard question to say no to.
yeah,
And
it's
they pronounce his name wrong, and but they have the they'll have the general
they know who
idea,
it
like,
is though,
they
you
know,
know,
like,
like,
they could call him Dark Vader, but they still it's everyone, like, I feel like everyone just, like, whether it's adapted, like a parodied media or just seeing a toy somewhere or something, just marketing, whatever. You've seen Vader somewhere or heard him, like you just from whether it's like you're watching like some kind of maybe you're watching an award show and there's a compilation and he's probably thrown in there or something. Like, like you hear his breathing or something. Like it's just like he's thrown into so many things. He's referenced so often and parodied and whatnot. He's everywhere, and he has been for almost 50 years now at this point. So it's really hard. There's a lot of generations that just know, like, have been around with him. So
yeah. I do think I definitely agree it's hard to argue against him in terms of sheer, like, pervasiveness in the cultural zeitgeist and just, like, everyone knowing who he is. I think it's him and Joker, right? Like, I feel like those
yeah,
are the
those are the
2,
two I can like that are
like, the
clear cut above the
at
rest.
like, at that level of just pure, like, iconography and people knowing who they are, like,
Hmm.
it's definitely them too, which is honestly even makes Vader's level on that, like, even more impressive when you consider the Joker is a comic book character that has infinitely more appearances and, like,
Yeah,
adaptations and time also on his side, like, in comparison,
he's also just
it's
older than Vader. Like he's just been around
yeah.
well before Vader.
No, it's a yeah, so it's a pretty wild thing that Vader's on that level, um so I definitely have to agree there. As far as like personal favorites, he's not my number one, I don't think. I also though I'm not sure who I have at number one. I think there's also then the like distinction between like film villain and just villain in general.
Right.
I
It's
think
yeah.
that
It's
if you
an
do
interesting line to walk.
yeah, I think if you do villain in general, he's definitely not number one because I start immediately throwing in a lot of comic book villains in there, right? And I
That's
do
fair.
think that
Yeah.
like Doctor Doom is for sure up there. Joker, obviously. Joker's then again not even my favorite Batman villain. So like you've got that
Hmm.
entire rogues gallery that I'm definitely not biased at all gonna be like pulling from. So I think that when you're talking like just villain generally, he's not super high up on my list. I think when you talk like movie villains or like even borderline TV villains, depending on what you want to like put in there.
TV villains,
Um,
Gus Fring, baby.
dude, top tier. I also so like I the one that's been sticking out to me who is more than just like so he would be a movie book and TV villain, but like Sauron is crazy
Hmm.
cool. He's definitely up there for me. Um, so like yeah, he's not my number one when it comes to like either a villain overall or like in a live action thing, but it's just so hard to argue against and like not have him like I'm like, "Oh yeah, but he's definitely in the conversation." Like he's
Yeah.
definitely one of the people up there cuz there's just something about him. I mean, we spent the whole episode talking about all the reasons why. Like he's got so much going for him in
Hmm.
terms of just everything is the whole package when it comes to that and like just there's a reason that he's been so cemented in and is that level of everyone knows Darth Vader is a villain and
Right.
can recognize him and that kind of thing, and for good reason. So like he's for sure up there. I think it really like a lot of it too will definitely I think person to person come down to how much you generally like Star Wars as like how
No,
much
yeah,
more
that's
you
why it's a
like
hard
Star
question
Wars.
to answer because
Yeah,
I'm a huge
'cause
Star Wars fan, but like, why wouldn't I not want to see Vader at number one? But also, I feel like he has the argument to be up there, but it's a weird question. I like I don't
I
want
think
my
that's also
bias to
like
come in on that.
if you're gonna ask it, you can ask the same question to a Harry Potter fan, and like, of course, they're gonna say Voldemort.
Hmm.
And as a like non, I like Harry Potter. I'm not a hardcore fan, but it's similarly. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see the argument for that. Like that definitely makes sense. And I also
No,
think
the
that
argument that kills Voldemort for me is it's a high school.
mm, it's so funny to
Sorry.
like to think about it, and I never really like thought about that. But yeah, I mean, dude is kind of just terrorizing high school. Um, No, but, like, I do think, though, that that person still, like, even if they have, the obvious heavy, like, Voldemort, Harry Potter bias, they'd still be like, "Oh, yeah, but
Right.
Vader is definitely in the conversation."
Oh
He
yeah, for
just
sure.
is at that level. It's really cool. There's just so many great villains, honestly, whenever you start, like, breaking it down. I was watching a video the other day of these guys that were ranking this, top 10 list, villains. I can't even remember who all was on there, but I was just looking at it. And I was like, man, this is good. There's a lot of good stuff here
Yeah, there's no
going through.
shortage of villains and bad guys, and that's great because that's all I want. That's what makes a story for me. Like, I mean, that's what I'm showing up for because I want to see what the problem is and why is it the problem and
Yeah,
how
I
it
mean,
gets
it's
solved.
there's a reason that there's that huge the famous quote that the hero is only as good as his antagonist, right? And
Hmm.
so it's that type of thing. They're a big driving force in the story a lot of the time, and so having that position be filled by someone who is like able to be in an all-time great thing is always going to benefit whatever it is.
Yeah,
Star Wars
exactly.
luckily got 6 movies and like hundreds
Yeah.
of comic issues out of that.
Yeah, yeah, their driving force was like world-changing movies, so I think they did pretty good in the villain aspect. But thank you
Yeah.
everyone for tuning into this episode, episode 9 of Framing the Force. Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at the Alex Batts, Batts.
And you can find me online at Robby underscore Weidemann. That's Robby with a Y underscore Weidemann and at SW Shot by Shot. Please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and at any platform where podcasts are found. Follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Elon still calls it Twitter, so I don't even know anymore.
Does he really?
Instagram, yeah, there was a whole, he dropped the meme the other day and it literally just said it was a meme and it called it Twitter and he just dropped it and it was like, whatever. So I don't know. But you can
Sure, man.
follow us there on Instagram, TikTok, and it'll be at The Aspect Co. Thank you to Peter Fraser for providing our series music, and thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in a galaxy far, far away.
Hey, thank you for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this show, then be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect so you never miss an episode.
And check out some of our other shows and videos here on the Aspect Network.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in a galaxy far, far away.